limb to actually hold on to it. You're just more kind of getting an inkling of an idea of where these players could be with how big this map can be sometimes. A little bit overwhelming. The attacking side can just find themselves situating around themselves. So, I mean, already you got to look at what we're going to be dealing with on the attacking side. I'm liking the Neon, obviously, when it comes down to that duelist pick. The Breach is going to be a little bit of a staple considering how much kind of stalling power it has there with these longer lineups you can find here around the map. But Bosco is the one I'm kind of keeping my eyes on. That double duelist starting off on that defense. I've already mentioned that retake is going to be the name of the game here. They're obviously going to be buying into it, but you don't have nearly as much utility as what you would say, I don't know, substituting one of those out for a KO and getting that suppression off. So it all comes really down to the shots. You got the entire confidence of a kit when it comes down to the double duels. We can see whether or not the guns are really going to match that empty.
Maybe a weaker defensive half for St. John Bosco. Sorry, I swear I'll get that right as well at some point in this broadcast. But if they're a team that is confident in their play style and they're standing up to this point, being the first seed here in this matchup, I would dare say they maybe have deserved the right to have that confidence. But Whitney High is not going to be a team that lets them get rolled over upon. Being a 4th seed, you're just up there with the best. You lost a single game through the season. Cannot be underestimated. Kane finds first pick here, though, for St. John Bosco over on this A site. Looks like they'll regress quite early to maybe catch Surge off guard. Unfortunately, the slide in from that Neon is a little bit too much for Kane to deal with. Sean is forced to go for the refrag and still puts the defense up at a man advantage. And Enzo's down to a tiny sliver of HP, but still manages to find the one-shot kill over towards Sky, hiding behind the Radiant crate.
Yeah, sadly though, I mean, has that spike in hand, having to go ahead and kind of keep themselves exposed. So that is going to be dropped in the meantime, knowing that player was a one-tap. But regardless, you're playing for trades here. You're looking for kills, and it all comes down to Dan, who does have that aftershock available. Just has to wait for that little bit of a concussion to come through. But still, in the meantime, you want to play with this health pool you have, hit your shots, but sadly, that's not going to happen. Then he's going to be able to go ahead and close things out. Grab that first round here for Bosco, which is going to be huge for him, considering that, once again, that double duelist setup, it's always a little bit shaky. But, I mean, when you find those first 2 rounds on the board, it leaves a lot of stress off the shoulders.
It was an interesting decision to actually re-swing when your secondary player, your crossfire player, was actually being zoned away by the last bit of utility from that aftershock. And it actually works out for you, but it's something that maybe Whitney High were trying to play for in the first place. Zone away the player coming from Link and try to take down the player inside Desert. It does not work. The St. John Bosco will now be priding themselves in a first-round victory, and we see a little bit here in the HSEL, at least more here so than we do see in maybe the collegiate scenes or the semi-pro scene, Dallas. Teams opting to go for a big rush, even after a loss in round 1, and buying up in full force for round 2. Whitney High have foregone that decision, thankfully so. And then because of that, they've already lost a single player, and 2, and a third being very low. It's a very tough round for Whitney High, who are just 2 players remaining up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to expect this round to be a little bit of a rollover. I mean, considering the guns that are in the hands of Shane Bosco, I mean, you just can't see really what's going to go on there with Whitney. But it's a nice little orbs farm in the meantime. You go ahead and get a little bit to work off of, but you know inevitably you are going to be shut down. You couldn't really bring that sheriff to do too much else, but it's not too much of a problem. You know this third round's coming up. You get your rifles to work with finally, inevitably as well. But the big trade-off comes off to what players are really opting to go ahead and buy in the meantime when it comes around to that armor, because you are taking somewhat of a sacrifice. You didn't get that spike down in that second round. You didn't get it down the first round either, and that could have been an extra 600 credits if you go ahead and just add up both to really give yourself some leeway here. But sadly, they just didn't find that.
St. John Bosco, keep in mind this is their map pick, but it is only the first 2 rounds. Once you find the pistol, the second one is pretty much doomed to follow suit afterwards. This is where Whitney High will finally bring proper weapons into this round, and considering that St. John Bosco did not lose very many of their forced SMGs in that last round, there should be a good position for them to keep fighting from here. Crossfire set up here from within Hall. Another one holding door. That sets up for a refrag. It's Sean to close out Enzo after they just found Sky. And that puts the defense back at a man advantage. And Whitney High don't really have the chance to entry in forward now that they're lacking that Neon. And boom goes the head of Dan. The breach off the board as well. This is a tough fight for Whitney High, who are losing when they should be winning.
Yeah, I mean, it's already just, when you see that start, things start to get shaky right out the get-go, when you know that, I mean, obviously, they don't have the superior rifling, but even then, Whitney High doesn't have the superior armor. They're kind of in a tie game. If anything, they're actually in a deficit because that money is being invested elsewhere that Bosco has already had to accumulate in the meantime. So they picked up these guns, they had the rifling holding down range, they knew that, okay, Spike is under our control, we just hold this thing down, get a little bit of a holdout, as you can see with Jet there back towards Dish. We got this player exactly where we want him. 6 feet under. Another round here for John Bosco as they found themselves a third in the row. This is a huge start for them, and I think, honestly, a little bit of a nail in the coffin. Obviously, a little bit of a shake-up here for Whitney High. You are going to have another round coming up here soon, but you need to go ahead and figure it out right now. Don't take a timeout, but honestly, you can sit and spawn. Take all the time in the world and figure out, all right, we need to use this as somewhat of a awkward timeout, a little bit of a default feeler, so we can understand what exactly we're going into when we get these rifles again, because we cannot let that slip through our fingers once more.
Whitney High honestly need to pressure over towards the B site instead. Yes, A is a very solid objective, especially when you're heading into a thrifty round, but you need to pressure B site to fully learn what defensive positioning and pressure in, well, agents more specifically, are actually being played by St. John Bosco over on that site, because they've only hit A. If they were to call a timeout now, they'd only be prepped for maybe 35% of the full matchup in 4 of these rounds, and it wouldn't really tell them enough. They'd have to be doing full guesswork for that B side. We do see them defaulting with 3 over towards Halls, 2 looking to move in towards Domino towards that B site. Once they lose the early aggression player from their Neon inside of Halls, they're going to rotate, pivot back up through ramp, and start to pressure direct in here towards the B site. But a player in tower may meet them first, but big frag by H Park to take down VAL.
And finally, a first blood underway here for Whitney High. I mean, that's kind of what they needed. Sure, a little bit of an exchange there towards the end, but knowing that you don't really have all the weapons in the world to go ahead and be taking these fights like that, and you're still able to go ahead and win, at least to some regard, this is a big round for you so far. So, I mean, find yourself that man advantage, work off of it. I mean, you don't have all the weapons that you need, but still, Bosco, they do have a lot of utility and all those weapons accumulated. So, H Park, if you can hit at least one more Guardian shot, I mean, I'd say you're as good as done for this round, or you can call it a little bit of a closure. I mean, Yagami closing things out there towards the edge of the map. You're seeing so many players towards Arcade. They have no emphasis over towards that actual main area, and it's working out perfectly for him.
Miri's just going to stick it as best they can. Trapped. And it is pure death. Whitney High finding a much-needed round win, and this one the cleanest they possibly could, considering what they came into this round holding. Forcing with only 2 players, the rest really just matching up for a rush, possibly through that A Halls. It was perfect. St. John Bosco knew there was pressure in A Hall, and they just spread themselves maybe a bit too thin in through tower on B, and weren't really ready for that direct pressure and that long shot pressure to come through from that Guardian, which is so deadly when placed in the right hands, and H Park proved it in that round that was the case. But thankfully for St. John Bosco, they've got plenty of money. They didn't buy rifles in that last round because they just took the ones Whitney High brought forward. So they'll be able to buy up here, and it'll be the first real rifle-on-rifle round for all players.
Most definitely will be, but I mean, once again, it doesn't really matter all that much. Kane, when you see this player get those initial picks, we have seen a 100% round win ratio so far in that, but that's not really the same case here. Already a little bit of a switch up, considering that you had a massive roll through there from Yagami earlier, just really getting the work down range, and it all comes down to Sky in the meantime with those kills going through. So 92 health, 33 armor, and a rifle in hand. Things are feasible here, and an ultimate to top it all off, but you don't really want to invest all that just yet. You know some damage is done on players here and there. You know the Cypher is addictive as all can be. You know that you've done damage at least onto that breach in the meantime. So, I mean, this is just a couple shots for each player, but you have to make sure to nail it all when it counts.
Big crossover with the boost pack. Isolates Dan. Tries to move to Enzo, but a proper swing in time, and Sky can't flick fast enough. And Whitney High will now climb 1 round closer to possibly tying things up. And now St. John Bosco were in a position where, yes, they could theoretically buy, but they're in a pretty rough strait. Kane can't do everything themselves. 2 kills to start things off, but 3 other players of St. John Bosco fall with nothing going for them. 2 of them taken down by the Cypher of Yagami in a single spray. That's something that St. John Bosco cannot allow for Whitney High to continue to do so. And unfortunately for them, not full armor for every player. And, well, Kane's not rocking a rifle because they have the Blade Storm. This could still be a tough round for them. And look how patient Whitney High are being, despite what we saw in that last round.
Yeah, got to see really where you can go ahead and make another dent here in the side. I mean, for both sides, regardless. I mean, Whitney High already going ahead, making sure they can retaliate pretty darn efficiently with those 2 rounds of the board. Haven't really invested too much in the meantime, and even then with a Thrifty, I mean, that just comes down to the economy, not just the actual utility and the ultimates that are here on the field. So, I mean, seeing what they could do, going ahead, hitting this B site once more. It's worked out for them twice. Why not go ahead and say and call it again? But eventually you got to switch something up, because you're going to expect that there's going to be a little bit too much over there towards that B side eventually to go ahead and match you, but that's not the case yet. And still, we're just seeing an entire default coming out from John Bosco, and you really can't blame him because it's been working so far, so long as Jet can get those initial first bloods and everybody else doesn't just kind of fall on the back end.
3 players in Hall for Whitney High. Notice where they've left their Cypher. Lagging behind quite far back over towards B ramp. They'll join that 4th, and once that number's been called, Whitney High will extend themselves out from door and in through Desert. Surge finds the first pick, this one on Tavea. Kane has been suppressed, and because of that, no longer has that Blade Storm. It's just a free kill on site with only that classic in hand. Cleaned up by Surge once again. St. John Bosco are at a huge man disadvantage. Made one more with the fact that Dan takes off Sean. But thankfully, Miri is still there. 3 kills in one fell swoop, tying things up to a 2-on-2. They'll orbital strike, it seems, onto site to maybe clear them away, but it's Sky to take down Yagami. Enzo, the only one left. They'll blind perfectly, but it's not good enough for 2. Sky clutching up big, and St. John Bosco will stop the hemorrhaging that allowed Whitney High 2 rounds there in a row. They'll climb up to 4.
Yeah, another big one coming out for John Bosco. I mean, you have to look for these rounds to double down on it even more so. I mean, just kind of the way they've been playing out these rounds. They've been really back and forth, but I mean, you've always found these impact players once again. Yagami earlier. Right here, you see it Enzo with the clearance on the site, going ahead and mowing things through. For some reason, these Sentinels and controllers, better yet, are really starting to come out and swing today because, I mean, I don't know what it is. Even you can see H Park having a couple of strings here and there. Miri able to go ahead and keep up with the best of them. I mean, it's pretty influential of what these players can do and more so. I'm excited to see what they can do on the second map because obviously we're going to get a lot more of them when it comes right to here Fracture.
Dances that Trimmer once more. That went more towards the link side of spawn for defenders. Kane finding 3 felled shots, 3 kills, and a huge pickup for St. John Bosco. Kane hunting for their 4th, forced to tailwind forward. Another one now dropping from top. Yagami is pinned, and their life is easily cut down. It's St. John Bosco finding another in a row. This one a lot cleaner than the last. But thankfully for Whitney High, maybe they won't have to push towards Kane. You always look for that one player, Dallas, that you want to avoid the site they're holding. Get away from this jet. Kane is going big. But the problem is, there's 2 duelists. Sky has been pretty much following suit behind Kane, and they are very quickly moving across this map.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, it's that much better when you have Kane kind of going off of their own rights, when you can see it with a Vandal better yet. Because usually, I mean, Jet is now that fill-in for the Chamber. Ever since we saw the big switch-up, Chamber isn't really nearly as good, but who needs it? You're rushing into spawn. You're managing kills like that for Kane once more with these opening picks. I mentioned earlier, when we see this player get these opening kills consistently, it is a big problem, and you're just seeing it happen again.
Kane is not getting away with it easily. Enzo will punish, but a full blind kill by Kane changes the game for Whitney High. A big man disadvantage, only an equal trade, the exact opposite of what they wish to see. Vea swings in towards Domino and yes, finds H Park, but Enzo's also in tower, taking down yet another. It's a full 1v3. They've got a lot of HP, and Enzo pretty much at a full 150, more like 130 in its totality. But St. John Bosco have 2 full HP players in Sky that they can bait. They'll do so here, allowing Enzo the 3K. But notice the transition by Sean alongside for the double swing. Clean by St. John Bosco to climb to 6.
You gotta double swing that. I gotta say, a little bit rocky there. Sort of tense up because I've seen way too many teams double swing those angles and then just line up their heads. And it is just a single tap, collat, you close that thing out. That could have been an easy shot for Enzo to take, quite honestly. I mean, consider what they've already done here today. But, I mean, keeping things rolling along, I mean, you just have to give a testament when it comes around once again to Kane. We mentioned that player earlier, and even then, not being on the operator, not taking those singular shots. It's more of a safety net if need be. In the meantime, you're able to not only hold down and take those single shots and get out, you're saying, I can stay. I'm not over-investing. I'm not overheating here. I'm completely cooled down. I'm keeping my composure here, just going one after the other after the other. And speaking of going in, we already see Neon trying to do it with an overcharge, but there is so much utility, you've already lost the majority of your health.
Whitney High dumped a lot of that util themselves, coming into this round with pretty much just a Thrifty to their name, hoping to repeat the same success they had last time they Thriftied in round 4. St. John Bosco, though, will allow for them to get this spike down. They did lose their Cypher fairly early in that engagement from Whitney High, but they did also force a ton of util away from them. The issue is they need to cut down the breach and the brim for Whitney High. Having those ultimates be available for a post-plant is detrimental to St. John Bosco's chances. The Rolling Thunder is sent out. It will knock down a ton of those players, but the push comes through by Kane alongside Sean, and it is 3 kills back-to-back. Miri finding one more, and though Sean loses their life, Miri will forfeit the last, giving St. John Bosco a very nice retake and a lot of Whitney High wasted utility. It will cost them despite being a thrifty.
And even then, only investing one in the meantime. I mean, this is perfect for Bosco. I mean, you just see it or just roll out. You're expecting Whitney High. Even then, after that rolling thunder, I mean, you're kind of expecting that leniency to go ahead and give him that leeway, but it's just not going to work for him. You have to go and have some synergy with that utility in the back end over there towards main. They got to play that out where you're not extending your physical body on site. You're just utilizing that crowd control, getting the most out of it, and possibly finding a free kill or two just based off the post-plant utility you have there in your arms. But you just don't have the players there, sadly enough. You're using these ultimates as compensation, as a little bit of a mitigation, and you can't be doing that. You have to set the tempo with them, and that's what we're seeing John Bosco do, because they are feeling extremely comfortable every single time they start these rounds, and you can see it in the confidence with the way they hold.
Confidence, though, maybe key for Whitney High. Look at how much pressure they're broiling up now in towards that B-side again. 2 kills. Dan starting things off and Surge following up behind it. St. John Bosco will need a lot more than confidence, Dallas, to come out with a win here in this round. 2 players already thrown to the wayside, while Sky is very close to a possible player up in tower. Cut down from main site, and that makes them swing out too far, where H-Park will conclude for the kill. Kane finds another kill back towards Surge. Gets spotted by H-Park. They'll be cloud bursted away, but it's just a molly to zone once again for the rotate. Not much left for St. John Bosco. What a play by Sean, though! Cutting down Enzo and Dan. Kane has to do a lot, though, to deal with H-Park. Also, another player invisible is Yagami, who takes the swing to Sean, who is going for the defuse.
Yeah, just once again, great patience. Just kind of play out here from Whitney High. Once they get the rounds to start working to the ways that they want it to and get that spike down with sufficient amounts of players, I'll admit, for some good exchanges, they can find themselves some very, very clean rounds. It's just that inch on the site that they're looking to be a little bit lackluster on, which, I mean, hey, on the defense, you don't have to really worry about that. You're already on site. You don't really have to invest anything. You're just looking for the retake, and that's what's going to start to concern me a little bit. But we got plenty of time before we even get there. You got 2 more rounds going underway, which could allow either Bosco to get themselves to 9 or Whitney High to find themselves at that 5 or go ahead and compensate right there in the middle. A little bit of negotiation going on. But regardless, though, one thing you can't negotiate is these ultimates have to get out of the hands. Blazestorm coming through. Nice little first bloods coming out. Exchanges out. But Kane is pushing towards the rope and can't find everything, but can at least get some damage down.
1 enemy remaining.
Ooh, one more crossing on ropes. Ninzo has no chance. Having already been on ropes, they can't turn back around, and they're forced to just slide right into the line of sight of the 2 remaining players for St. John Bosco, Sean and Vea. And while Vea's been bottom fragging so far for the side of St. John Bosco, it's not been by a large margin. It's just that Kane has been dominating the leaderboard and the scoreboard because of the way that they've been playing. And a great job to use that Bladestorm effectively. Great pickup for 1. Huge damage onto the second. That's a cleanup kill that's available for St. John Bosco. But you're now heading into this next round, and Kane is changing the game plan. Last round before the swap, and an operator is on the board for Kane.
Slow and steady. Whitney High. Not really the best of situation, as you can already see. I mean, a Guardian being purchased from at least one of the players, but with 2 ultimates to work off of, they have the space. They have a first blood as well on the most impactful player of John Bosco thus far, considering, I mean, if we're taking the leaderboard as the only factor to that. But there's still plenty on the board. You still have ample time. Some pretty good sets of resources of that Rolling Thunder and Orbital Strike. The problem is you pop them both at the same time. Don't get all the synergy in the world. You're just kind of locked out of the site now.
It's a little slow for St. John Bosco as well. The Rolling Thunder comes after Whitney High have already escaped from the objective. Enzo, having collected the operator brought by Kane previously, is able to take 1 kill, falls quickly after the fact. Spike was starting to be defused by Miri, and H-Park was just standing there. Head down, refusal to be spotted, hiding in a corner, and it catches St. John Bosco off guard. A round won by Whitney High, a very clean one, and just St. John Bosco didn't make full use of the ultimates because they were just slightly too slow in the draw.
I mean, already, I mean, this is kind of half going underway. I'm excited to see what can happen with it, but already, I mean, just it's good for Whitney High to get themselves a 4th because, I mean, keep in mind, after that 3-0 start, that really just kind of stung them, and even then, once again, a little bit of a double down afterwards. I mean, coming back with a vengeance for 4 more back-to-back for John Bosco, it's kind of surprising, even just better yet, very impressive for Whitney High to have that resiliency to keep themselves in kind of a standing like this, because a lot of teams, once you let that econ accumulate, it's really hard to bounce back from. So already, I mean, looking at this kind of half going underway, John Bosco now having that double duelist set up, this is where we get to see that acceleration. I mean, you got a car, you got all the horsepower in the world. Let's see when you start to run out of gas, whether or not you have already prepped yourself.
Shots connecting for H-Bar. Kane had the same fell swoop, though, just moments prior to Enzo. Surge taking goes to the head of Vea, but Miri with that frenzy finding 2. Very effective on these points. St. John Bosco, though, get that spike down and throw some util back over towards Rope to deal with Search, and Dan's not far behind them. Dan taking down Sky, a 1v2 manageable, because Sean has been driven to below 50 HP. Classic right click can kill, but you got to be close enough to find that impact, and Miri is holding a wonderful cutoff. They'll essentially bait out Sean for the first engagement. Miri may be overextending too far around that corner. Thankfully, the Frenzy doesn't run out of ammo too soon, and they'll get that kill for the third in that round. St. John Bosco go to 9.
That's big for them. I mean, going ahead when you consider the bonus on top of this and the kind of aggression, the amount of just absolute domination they had when it came around to this last bonus round, you can go ahead and kind of consider that they're probably going to be going on a 10. And that's that double-digit setup that I talk about so much, where it can be a checkpoint or a chokehold kind of situation. And I think Bosco, when you look at it, and even them winning 3 in a row in that last half, you're not really too concerned about them being choked up anywhere. They can definitely go ahead and kind of pop over the line whenever things really get deep and dirty. But, I mean, considering that Whitney High, this is where they have to make things at least expensive. You can't let that third round be a freebie. You know that, I mean, you don't have the luxury of getting these plants, and you didn't even have them the first time. Better get right now. So already a free little pick coming out there. Some good exchanges, and better yet, I talk about expensive. You have a majority vote.
Unexpected. Unexpected from Whitney High. Miri played a beautiful angle in Desert. All of those weapons now dropped there and next to door are collectible for Whitney High. Not just for the end of this round, but here for this engagement now onto Sean. He'll do exactly that. Enzo drops down. A little bit of assistance there from Miri, who also dropped down to collect a weapon. And it is easy pickings with a wide swing there to the final remaining player for St. John Bosco. And that is a mold being broken here in Valorant, much like we saw in the first half. But instead of it being a 3-0 start for St. John Bosco, it's a one-and-done start as they'll trade rounds evenly at the beginning.
I mean, already just a huge round going away there for Whitney High. I mean, when you to consider the kind of the economy that goes just in all other certain directions after rounds like that, it can mean the world and really give yourself so much space to just look towards the future when it comes to these next coming rounds. I mean, I'd say at least 3 rounds worth of economy has been just messed up in that one singular round. But regardless, I mean, they can go ahead and get themselves a nail in the coffin right here, or at least get themselves some nice leeway and a really good speaking point to get themselves possibly into a tie situation. But it's got to start right here where they can actually hold on to every single rifle. They have the majority of their team, but Kane is still on the field and has a sheriff. So that's going to be another problem considering, well, they're going to go ahead and just find themselves an upgrade.
Free is free. I mean, still costs you a couple of credits for the sheriff. But it works. Enzo slowly prowling up on short ram towards this B side, but pressure from tower from Kane still somehow gets the better end. That free upgrade we talked about paying dividends here. And another one now on site means that Whitney High have their work cut out for them. Kane plays a very aggressive angle and Sky tries to swing in tandem, but too late between them. They trickle in instead, leading to a 1-in-1 fight for Dan, who takes both in stride. Sending out a huge dump of util towards Domino. Vea, though, huge play, top of rope, 2 kills. And it's just Dan remaining, who will have to be forced to ace in this round and get the defuse. Unfortunately, Vea has to reload, but the damage has been done. 5 HP. I think Dan has just decided the rifle is more important. Let's save it for the next.
Yeah, you're definitely not walking out with that one, regardless if you want to go ahead and try and stick that thing down. I mean, no matter what, they're going to throw their lives on the line because guess what? Bosco has themselves a bye in the round anyways because, well, if you look at the board, it's a thrifty. They don't care. They will throw those bodies on the line, and they will make sure to rob that gun out so you know that you won't have anything to work with. It all starts right here once again. Came with an opening pick. It's just a domino effect past that point. Start using the numbers, overwhelm things, but even better yet, Vea right there, just going ahead and going absolute nuts with those sheriff shots in their own right, which is huge to go ahead and turn the tide. So, I mean, I talked about the economy, the way things can be switched up, and even in a round like that, the last one you had to make sure to win that, and more times than not, you'd expect the team to, well, close it out. That's just not what happened. So once again, we're back to the same old situation of what is going on. We're not quite sure, but those rifles on the board, just not in everybody's hands.
Whitney High are unfortunately now looking at a double-digit side for St. John Bosco, have reached themselves to 10. That is twice their current scoreline. It's going to require everything they've been capable of up to this point to meet what St. John Bosco have been capable of, and this plant is already going down. Vea having to deal with sheriffs against them, does find H Park. Second one isn't far behind, and will finally deal with Yagami, but in the same spell swoop, Kane cuts down the rotate away from the A site and deals with another one, but can't finish off Dan. 3 out of the 5 of the side of Whitney High were able to buy a rifle in this round, a lot of that being greatly assisted by Dan saving their rifle from the round previously. So 2 rifles were forced, an SMG in the hands of their Neon, and then it looked like a single sheriff in the pockets for your bottom frag. Somewhat smart idea from Whitney High, but it's just another round that doesn't seem collectible for them, and they're just going to fall back hastily towards that A site, all the way back towards Dish. They want to hold on to what they have in hopes that maybe this was enough for the thrifty they can buy again.
Got to see what's going to be going away here. I mean, for Whitney High, I mean, it's their turn to go ahead and step onto the plate. I mean, they've had to swing over and over and over in this game so far. I mean, they've hit themselves a couple shots, but I mean, now they just want to go ahead and call out a little bit of a timeout to give themselves some time to discuss about the next one at hand. And I mean, you really can't blame them. When you're at a 6-round deficit, Bosco's looking at themselves at match point coming up here. If they close out on this one with the 3 ultimates they have at their disposal, the orbital strike isn't really too much of a concern. It is that first blood neural theft that you are more concerned about than anything else, considering that, well, after ciphering that change, so long as you get a corpse laying around, especially on a site that you've already taken control of, you can choose when to just throw that thing down. Say, okay, we understand where this retake's coming from. We can get the little setup, and the orbital strike can just be there as a little bit of a, I mean, just an absolute holdout. Create a wall and just keep on buying out time. So, I mean, Whitney High, they're in a bad spot. I think, honestly, they just kind of you got to win out in their initial fights. That's really what it comes down to. You're on defense. You don't set the pace of this game. You just have to be ready for whatever Bosco brings at you.
I think one of the problems we're also seeing for Whitney High is that St. John Bosco have brought out double duelist. They have an entry. They have someone that helps them on the ego, like Chamber used to be, the most economically savvy agent selection you could have. Yes, the Headhunter was expensive, but a Tour de Force could be bought in a thrifty round and give your team a fighting chance. Same as the Blade Storm, while also having utility that is indicative of your role as a Chamber. Whitney High don't really have that. They would if Surge was able to find these opening picks, and despite the losses against them, would have been able to count up that ultimate and have that overdrive and be capable of finding those picks with the wide swing in. But that just hasn't happened in this half. Surge has been really cut down. Surge has not been able to go big like they were in that first half, and because of that, Whitney High are starting to struggle, and it's been the opposite for Kane, who has been playing beautifully. Unfortunately, it does not stop for St. John Bosco. Blade Storm kill, 2 blades, and it's done, and they'll follow in for a third. Kane does it best. Don't tell me otherwise.
Yeah, just within seconds. I mean, you look at the timeout round, you're saying, okay, we come into this thing fresh, and it's gone. It's just, man, not really too much you can do at a point like that, especially, I mean, when you look at Kane, them going off, getting just more and more aggressive, feeling themselves over the course of this match. It's going to be scary what this player can do, especially when it comes around to Haven. I mean, that's the problem. It's not only just this map alone. This is the first map. This is the best of 3. We just got another one to go away. But last thing you want is a jet feeling themselves, because that's the one agent. It's not like a Neon where you're going to say, all right, we may see with the next map, or Harbor. No, you can see a jet anywhere. And if Kane is starting to build themselves, well, they're going to say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Unfortunately, Kane may be a little bit more broke than working. Bites the bullet here from Yagami, and so does Sean. Off screen, H-Sparks takes down Sky. It's only 2 remaining for SJB. Vea tries to swing alongside their cohort here of Miri, the last remaining player, and thankfully, Miri can get a double spray down. Surge and Dan just line up. That was what we were saying was dangerous for St. John Bosco. And that first half for their double swing we saw, it comes through, but for Whitney High this time around. They'll have to smoke away. They're going to orbital strike towards Link to make sure there's space. They're going to fall back here, more likely not through Hall, but it's a bait. Miri's going to swing over towards drop, towards top, and hide just beneath where Yagami and now their Prim as well are going to be coming from. This could be perfect, but they need to drop simultaneously if Miri wants the best possible chance. And unfortunately, they're watching down below. Yagami knows exactly where they are, and it is done and dusted. St. John Bosco will be forced to stay unfractured for at least one more round.
I like the idea, but the execution just wasn't there. Even better yet, the right angle wasn't being watched in the meantime. But regardless, Whitney High get themselves at least 6. That's all they need in this series. Just go ahead, keep yourself, make sure to stay warmed up a little bit. Make sure these rounds go the distance and just take it one by one. Don't stress about the score. Don't worry about the fact that, well, St. John Bosco is on match point and double your score. That's not a concern. If you just keep on winning out these rounds, keep on filling yourself. See if you can get these players on these streaks. I mean, we already talked about Kane starting to warm up, starting to really find that momentum in their own right. You got plenty of time to make sure that other players can get their own same respective momentum starting to go on here. So, I mean, even then, Yagami, a little bit odd there on the Sentinel, but I mean, he's still going to be able to get the job done. I mean, everybody else, I talked about Whitney High, and even more so what these controllers can be doing for the squad. I mean, for both sides of the field, better yet. We're going to see what exactly is going to be done about that. But as it stands for right now, looking for first bloods, and already 2 inside of Bosco. And even in a third, fourth, Whitney High is only left 1.
Enzo will have to ace out this round. Already can deal with Kane. Sean not far behind, having already been damaged in that previous engagement. Paint shell sent out by Sky, and Enzo will be zoned away effectively. But it will not stop the plant on this A side. Spike is officially down. Sky playing a very cheeky angle, forcing the sight line of Enzo down to the Roomba of death, but it cannot find anything cleaned and securely. Enzo, though, finally swings out perfectly from their own pop flash, and Sky will be at the other end of their barrel. A 3K already, hunting for their 4th, and will have to find the 5th if they want the best possible chance here with this hold and this retake. They'll pop the no command. Might as well. It's possibly the last round, and in fact will be. VAL holding in Hall secures your final pick, and St. John Bosco will be finding themselves.
On Bosco, I need to run in, see what's going on in this spawn. If I can take 2-3 down, good luck getting on site, buddy, because that's just an even affair no matter where you go.
We're seeing a big change up. Kane over to the Neon. Surge, who was on that Neon previously for Whitney High on Fracture, over towards the Jets. I would dare say Whitney High's lineup is maybe more normal for a map like Haven, but Neon floats in exceptionally well on this map. In fact, Dallas, I think most of the time we ever see Neon get brought on, she does well. You've got to be confident to bring a Neon into a map like Haven where you could just go tried and true and do just as well, if not better. But the trust is there. Vea gets first blood, but it's Canes that's gorgeous. Takes down Dan. The rest of the team falling inside Garage, but the man advantage already netted towards St. John Bosco. And Whitney High, very disjointed for this push through to the C site. And there's even a flanking presence from who else but Kane, who deals with Enzo and H-Park. 3K galore. St. John Bosco take the first.
Yeah, perfect little rival there to go ahead and get that back up, especially going there towards lane. You know the push is coming through, and even you had the lap around, which just kind of worked out for you. So a nice, once again, solid start coming from John Bosco. Know when these calls are coming through. It almost feels like players that aren't even alive are still going ahead and kind of contributing. I know you're used to Siege. It's almost like they're playing camps. They're working as a coach that's in the middle of the match to say, look, go ahead, don't peek just yet. Play out safe behind cover, because I can tell you from experience of years of watching these players play, you don't see nearly as much discipline out of players to just go ahead and say, let's not take a fight and wait till I have somewhat of an edge, or wait till I have backup. Usually go ahead and they get caught in the moment. Things just start getting a little bit flustered. They can't figure out what's going on there. But Vea knows that you've at least gotten that first kill on the board, so you're happy about that one. Because see, long is going to be held down for just a little bit, teensy bit longer.
Great shots, though, by Yagami. Deals with Vea over towards platform. It is the only player actually taking control here towards C long, no one pressuring C in general. This would be the perfect time for Whitney High to swing in towards an opposing site, take B, take A more specifically. But look at what the other 3 players are doing. They're too slow in the draw. They did not catch on to the fact that St. John Bosco sent all 4 players towards C to defend. Because of that, they're actually going to have some level of defense here towards the A side, but I think the right level of defense. Forgoing an active defense of the site and instead playing for information and for the retake. Knowing that they'll have those SMGs to work with, they can swing these corners rapidly and try to bite at the throats here of Whitney High as they go for this plant, conclude it, and now have to defend their objective, where it's going to be mostly reliant on these corner holds. But that's where Miri can really snuff it out with a bit of intel from that recon bolts. They're going to do it right over the top here from short ramp. Sent forward. That'll cut out corner player where Kane can slide in towards long ramp. It is a beautiful retake by St. John Bosco. The cleanest you could possibly ask for.
Just once again underway, you're expecting Bosco to deliver, and that's exactly what they've done. Which Whitney High, you can't really sleep on them just yet. It's the first 2 rounds. They got this fight down for at least one of them. So, I mean, they're getting themselves better results of what we saw in Fracture during those kind of first couple rounds to play with. And they have a little bit of leeway in terms of the money. Because guess what? They all have full armor. We're not seeing any sacrifices. They're actually able to have that survivability behind the assault that they want to bring here into this game. So, I mean, that's good lookings for them. They could have themselves, hopefully, maybe not another 3-0 start. But it all comes down to Bosco once again. You saw the kills go underway. You saw the clean execution for these retakes. They know where these guys are sitting. You just have to make sure that you're ready for them once they really just deliver these retakes and really start getting them underway. But a nice couple, little bit of a quick start, I'd say, in terms of popping the utility. Kane looking for a quick start as well, trying to go ahead and catch his players off guard, and honestly may have some envy here, but I mean, you're getting sniffed out, Chief. There's a lot on the board, and even then, that aim did not line up where you needed it to.
Yeah, and Kane just can't slide into the correct spacing, and Surge will have no problem cleaning up for that kill. Wonderful owl drone from Whitney High to seemingly foresee that a player could be inside of main, having pressured through long. One thing that we personally both like, I assume, about a map like this, and Neon more specifically in this map, defensively, you can use your wall to close out space and cut sight lines so your defense can quicker step towards C, towards the action from their spawn. Same thing through halls on A, but more specifically, the slide out of heaven on A, you'll drop faster and be more effectively out of space that is controlled by the attacking side in their post plant. Neon fits this map beautifully. Yes, Jet can tailwind out further to get that open space, but they're still trapped skyward, which makes it difficult to fire back from and leaves you as a sitting duck, so would say, or maybe a flying duck in this scenario. Surge gets a first pick here on Deshaun. Once again, unfortunately, St. John Bosco have given up a lot of control here for the objective, as expected, though. Only 2 players remaining, and he's got a share from up in heaven, but I don't think anyone's going to give them a true time of day, as Whitney High are very happy with the 4 rifles they still have remaining and would like to hold on to them for the time being.
Yeah, I'm just happy to see them in Whitney High. They had themselves a good start in this round. I mean, they're actually able to go ahead and find the appropriate kills, but it doesn't go without its own costs. Being able to go ahead and get a nice little kill there towards the edge, but the exchanges across the board are just outstanding here for Whitney High. With 3 players alive towards the rear end of this round, you're saying that, okay, they have something in the board. They're looking good. They actually have now a rifle round on the 3rd round that's expected to be coming out of them. And it didn't really cost them too much either because they did have the majority. That was not something we saw in Fracture, but again, it wasn't their map selection. So maybe they're feeling a little bit more at home here, and we're going to see probably a closer series overall is what I'm bargaining on.
Whew. Whitney High, keeping majority of their rifles in that round. Let's keep in mind, in the first map of Fracture, it went 3-0 start for St. John Bosco, and went 1-1 in the second half. Yep. Something that Whitney High were at least able to do much better of in comparison. And while St. John Bosco did have a moment where it was somewhat close, maybe if we saw Kane do a little bit better on the rush out, much like here in this round, where note the little blue X we see over inside of C Long. Kane decided to re-swing aggressively and pays the price because of it. Now giving Whitney High the best chance they have here of taking that A site and holding down long ramp for the post plant, when they no longer have to worry about Kane sliding out and being so difficult to fire back at.
Gotta see what can really be squeezed out here. I love when the Omens can kind of slip through the back lines, like to see what can get done. I mean, just consider what these players do specifically, but just that entire gunfight didn't really go the way that Bosco wanted it to. Once again, this Neon, Kane is going to have to go ahead and kind of find a little bit of discipline of their own here, considering that, I mean, when you look at it, Indy, the way they were just kind of playing in that last map and how well they were performing, and even then, switching on to a Neon, that just screams, hey, I'm getting aggressive. I'm going to push. I want to get in your face. And Whitney High, they say, we just sit and spawn, find that first blood. It's a free man advantage every single round. We have to see someone switch up there from John Bosco, but hey, it's their turn to figure it out. They have to get the job done because, well, they also have the advantage when it comes around to the map count. So, see what they can get done in the meantime, considering they're pushing onto the safe side. Nice little Trojan horse in the middle of the map when it comes around to that cage. Everybody else is making their way home, and they are really getting comfy and settled in the meantime.
Yugami's going to work in from short, make sure that there's no chance St. John Bosco can rotate through long to catch them off on the flank. Vea taking down Dan, has a little bit of assistance from their breach not far behind them. Does even things to a 4-on-4. Vea is going to play over towards long and make sure that there is in fact a player there, meaning that when they try to drop out of heaven, which they're trying to do so here to deal with the players down in hell, they may have to watch out and actually smoke off that ramp, which they do, but it doesn't save their lives. Sean taking down their doppelganger. Unfortunately, Yagami gets the upper hand. Miri, the only one remaining, and yeah, that Vandal is worth a little bit more than your life here. Hold it on for the next. Whitney High will tie things up 2-2.
Yeah, once again, another big round going away for Whitney High. I mean, you're seeing them once again kind of stand up, make sure to tie this game up, and even then, I mean, Bosco not really able to hold down these sides that they want to. When you lose an initial player, that was a big factor we saw over and over again when it came around to Fracture. They were able to go ahead and push up. They had a lot more angles, a lot more kind of areas of the map where they could have pushed out of, making it a lot more likely for them to go ahead and turn the defensive side into the attackers. Haven is a lot more default. It's a lot more old school. You're not having any of these kind of weird things across the map. It's just the only thing that's added on it is one more site. So you can't get that crazy, that wacky about it. You can't overstep your boundaries because these lanes, there's not too much trading potential out of it unless you have direct backup behind you. And that's just not the case. But once again, we're seeing some aggression already being pushed through into the A main area, but it's a full ringer in the Rosie. Whitney High is pushing C, and nobody's there to answer them.
They're going to get a free plant here. St. John Bosco went for an active defensive A site, and they took that gamble, and unfortunately, it didn't pay off. Maybe they'll have to try again in another round. But for now, St. John Bosco have their hands full here on this retake with limited weapons truly to work with. Vea tries to move in, tries too quickly. Will pay the price off the back of it. Kane does find one kill, and that may just be it for this round. And that will, in fact, be the case. Whitney High collaborate for the Final Four, and it will be a round win result for them with St. John Bosco kind of paying the price that is that thrifty round, but they'll finally be able to buy rifles up for this one.
I mean, they're finally able to go ahead and get themselves a little bit more leeway when it comes around to the buys, obviously, but even more so, I mean, possibly another chance to go ahead and kind of, I don't know, just group up, figure out what's going on here, because I mean, you got to keep on playing the defense. This is the side of the map they're on. They're on Whitney High's pick, and sure, the attacking side, they have a lot more, just emphasis in this map because they set the tone. We saw the same kind of layout in the last map where John Bosco started on the defensive side. Your tricks aren't going to work anymore. Play back, hold your angles, play the game as it's intended to be. Sure, you're going to be stepping things up on the attacking side with that neon because you're going to be playing your role and playing the overwhelming numbers at the start of a round. But that's not a luxury you could really afford in a situation like this because when you lose that first blood, things go bad. But it's not a big problem right here considering that Yagami's dropped pretty early on. You have no smoke skin on the side. Whitney High are going to be in a really bad spot for this one.
Kane's holding off as best they can. Whitney High's taking their time, though. They realize they have the man advantage or man disadvantage, and so they're going to try to play as slow as they possibly can to isolate an individual and go for a even position to eventually sprint onto a site for the retake. That's what they're doing currently in Courtyard. Sean will be the first player to possibly meet them. And once that utility is finally sent out their way, you can finally see a nanoswarm doing exactly that. Whitney High will, unfortunately, have to meet Sean. Perfect play, backwards through Link towards the A side. Sean deals with Dan. Enzo with a very wonderful swing does come victorious against one, but Kane can refrag just as quickly. There's two there now. You guys had no information. Your Sova went towards site. Your information gatherer was with Surge. Because of that, it's more difficult now here for the retake. They do take down one. It is Kane off the board. That's good for Whitney High. But Miri has a wonderful top-down angle, and it is pure Star Wars success. The high ground comes up clutch, and Vea takes it from the normal approach. It's St. John Bosco finally climbing back after a 3-round loss for 8.
Yeah. Keeping it neck and neck in this series, or at least more specifically in this map. I mean, consider what we saw in Fracture earlier on, but I mean, able to go ahead and get themselves a nice, clean couple first frags off the board. And that's really how this map goes, with how long it can be, with how kind of spread out things can be as well. With how discombobulated you can get with your teammates if you're not really there. Considering Fracture, I mean, you can kind of have so many different entry points from a site and everything feels connected in its own right because, well, it's just one big giant lap. This map can definitely make you feel isolated. You can definitely tell that things are segmented off to where you're going to have to get somewhat of a rotation going through there. It's not a hop and a skip away. It's a little bit of the jog, and Kane's the one who can actually run inside this matchup. So, I mean, you're going to see what can be done here. Already, once again, Whitney High, they have purchases because their rounds have been pretty consistent in terms of how many players are surviving, and even then with the string of rounds they've gotten. But Kane, with that aggression, actually able to go ahead and get a nice effect off of that and get a nice little first blood on the back of it with that spike control and a second to top it off.
Kane, 75 HP remaining. That's at least 3 more kills if they can keep it upright and deny as much damage back their way. They're hunting for it. Now moving all the way back in through a lobby. Surge is being kept back, though. Wonderful play from St. John Bosco from Sean. Unfortunately, losing the teammate Amiri, has to refrag back. Does so successfully, taking a worse duel than you could possibly imagine. Paying the price because of it. Kane has to get their third, hunts for the fourth, and Surge denies. Sees the one in heaven, but it's not the heaven player that catches them off guard. Down below from long ramp comes Vea. And St. John Bosco will now go back ahead in this game. A pretty back and forth action, but the same thing could be said for the first half of Fracture until St. John Bosco just took the lead.
Yeah, I mean, it's really what it goes down to. Bosco able to finally get themselves a little bit of a lead on the board after those 3 consecutive put back-to-back by Whitney High. But, I mean, you can see that they really accumulated themselves some ultimates in the meantime. So that utility, that kind of luxury they've allotted themselves could be utilized right here, right now. But you got to make sure to keep those players alive. Once again, kind of hit back in spot a little bit. Figure out what's going on and push as a group, because these kind of spread out defaults ain't working for you, because already that overcharge and shots through the wall made Dan a very easy kill to pick off. And well, Ace Park just going to follow suit.
Shots to be sung forward. Whitney High trying to play from hang and maybe get rid of those pesky garage doors to go for a wall bang. It does force Sean and back further more towards the C site. And unfortunately, it may have been the opposite approach that they wanted to go for, because now it makes their inside C long play a little bit more difficult. Yagami will hide within the Omen smoke. They'll send out 2 flashes, a cloudburst, and a paranoia over here towards Cubby, but it doesn't stop Sean from getting a wonderful angle there onto Surge. But it does allow for Whitney High to go for 2 refrags, finding themselves now at an even man advantage. Mira clear out the back Radiant crate. They'll clear outside, and they'll clear out long towards Cubby. But Yagami will barely survive that onslaught and will have fun with their Shrouded Steps to bait out a retreat. But the flank is being held by St. John Bosco over in Hay. It's hard to tell if they've truly fallen for, but note, Miri is all the way on the A site now. It did work for Whitney High, and Yagami will have a free plant.
Yeah, so long as they decide to at least go for it. I mean, with how much time you're spending, you're waiting for these last couple seconds, and even you're expecting somewhat of a player to kind of overextend in the meantime. But there it is, a rotation going through. Honestly, that from the shadows, that's the kind of mind games that goes away for an Omen player. You never know what's going to go. You never know what's going to happen. Even with a smoke there in the last couple seconds, you've given away your position. That is an easy pick coming up from Vuya, and that is a closure of another round to go ahead and get themselves a 5th. Whitney, I mean, Yagami, I love what this player did. I love the idea of just kind of playing these mind games. Just, I don't know, considering the stress at hand and knowing kind of the map layout with Bosco covering every side except for the one you're at, you can't help but feel a little bit flustered.
Last time St. John Bosco took a 2-round lead was in the first 2 rounds of this half. Look what happened afterwards for Whitney High. 3 rounds back-to-back. I don't know if that'll continue. Look what Surge is bringing here in this round. And yes, they have a Blade Storm. But if you're going to use the Blade Storm, why would you buy a Stinger? Why would you waste a little bit of extra credits on top? It just seems like a, I don't know, disjointed. But it may just work. Rolling Thunder sent out by Whitney High. Surge goes deep and does find 1. But unfortunately, St. John Bosco will double the tally, finding 2 out the back. Whitney High gained control of the B site, but they forego it completely, pivoting in through Garage and taking this C site to join Dan, who took the objective first and foremost through long.
Now, looking for a little bit more just kind of emphasis when it comes down to this wrap. I mean, seeing what can be done there in the meantime, but it's just not going to be enough. When you look at that KJ going through St. John Bosco, they know that, honestly, we don't need to respect it. We push through. We hit numbers here. We get closure because our retakes are some of the best we have in the league. So just run through it, get this round done and dusted, and guarantee yourself an even half of the map, no matter what. But, I mean, this half, it comes out of the next one now. You're seeing even across the board. You're seeing these players start to invest a little bit more utility, and it's just not really warranted at the end of the day. So I'm sure that's going to be a big round Whitney High can go ahead and kind of think about in the back of their heads. Maybe slow down for a second and figure out what went wrong. But, I mean, because you got 3 more rounds to go on this attacking side. That is one of the most influential ultimates you could have right there that's been, I wouldn't say wasted, but definitely didn't really get the effect that you wanted. You're going to have to really consider your next couple moves because things are only going to get harder from here.
It's a game of chess, not checkers. Sometimes you have to give up a piece to take 2 more, and St. John Bosco are just apparently just being built a little bit better when it comes to that mind game. And overall, I think the utility battle, which is truly a game of chess when it comes to who's using what when they're using it and just monitoring that count and tally, is also been favoring St. John Bosco. I like that Whitney High have been changing their strategy round by round, but it just still feels too one-dimensional, Dallas. Yeah. It's a game of push here, but you're really baiting towards here. Push towards A, but actually you've got a player already on C side. Hey, we've seen this before. What do you mean? It's brand new. This is the exact same strategy from last round, but instead of pushing through B site with an ult, you've just saved the ult and already put a player on C. But this time it's not Dan. It's Yagami who took the point. and Whitney High are going to get a plant here.
Yeah, gotta see what can be done. I mean, it's a much quicker plant element. I mean, and you even then have that Hunter's Fury can be put back towards that map and even going and holding things out and just get that down range. Just wait for that tap to go through. Play off the audibles because you got yourself a nice even exchange in the meantime. The defender KJ goes through. You're looking to see if you can get the hits off that, but you're getting some damage on players first. Very, very early pop of this ultimate, albeit, because, I mean, consider that you got in at least a half in the meantime, but Whitney High is holding it down. A 1v2 situation. You see the player down range. Via has to hit these shots. It seems like nobody can, but with the help pool kind of favoring Whitney High, they're going to just take a shot and win it out.
St. John Bosco will be denied of going positive at halftime for at least one more round. Whitney High doing a wonderful post-plant scenario. You see a lot of teams in the collegiate scene, even Dallas, struggling with post-plant on C, especially when it comes to full rifle buys. Just a couple days ago, actually, here for the HSEL, we saw a showcase where post-plant came on the C side, and unfortunately, no live pings were created by the player who planted to tell them where that spike was, and so they sprayed the wrong way. And the defuse went through cleanly without a shot connecting to the player sticking it. That's what you don't want to see. Whitney High doing that well, showing that they truly are 4th seed. I believe the 9th seed was the team that did that previously. They truly are deserving of this 4th seed. But St. John Bosco's first, and look what they're doing here. It's Kane, good for one more. Sends out a rally, goes for another, re-swings again, but unfortunately finally shut down by Dan.
Just again and again and again, you have to expect these things. If you don't, you're going to be punished for it. I mean, once again, these are the rounds, so you can go ahead and kind of look back on it and say, man, we have to be prepared for the player that is pushing into our spawn. It happens just over and over. We're not quite sure where it comes from, and that just gives you one more reason to even sit further back. I mean, I understand. You got a minute on the clock. You can figure out whatever. And Bosco isn't going to move anywhere until you give them a reason to move. So, that default never switches. They're never going to just go ahead and off a whim decide to completely rotate around the map and kind of play a little bit of switch up and hopscotch with themselves. They're going to stick to those spots, but they really have even more reasons to do that considering they've already knocked down 2 of your players and exchanged only one who, well, like I mentioned earlier, has 2 initiators and doesn't care about the retake.
You gotta go ahead and stick down this plant. Shock Dart comes out. The first one went a bit too wide. The second one will tag them down to 44 HP. Enzo's going to play around this corner. Turret gets paranoid, and because of that, Enzo goes through unscathed, and it's 3 for free! God. All for Enzo. Whitney High will find themselves more likely than not at 5, but Miri's still alive, and finally shut down. Whitney High, a miracle on A, because somehow they paranoid perfectly to stop that turret from even finding space. Just amazing.
Over and over again, we're seeing highlights like this. Players can get these things done. They can see the jobs being executed. And that angle, I'm going to be real, it happens way too many times. It happens much more than you'd expect. It is that little cubby right there that people don't check. And it has no reason to change that because, 9 times out of 10 is getting checked. But at one point, it feels like whenever things are definitely on the line and the pressure starts to well up, that's what matters the most to say, man, really? Really? We didn't do that. Okay, it is what it is. We'll put the blame on somebody later, but right now we're still ahead. But even in not really too much of a lead considering the 6-5 and 1-for-1 on the board in terms of kills thus far. A nice even little exchange going through. And, well, a nice little ultimate to go ahead and be sent out. Just barely missing the ear of Enzo. But regardless, Yagami is able to capitalize on top of it.
Enzo's going to be ready now. Full HP. Didn't even take a lick of damage to the armor. And is priming the Rolling Thunder. It gets sent. Furled out towards St. John Bosco. Thankfully, 2 players already up in heaven may have been able to avoid the majority of that util. VAL will smoke off towards short. Shrouded step in. Beautiful, but unfortunately, not winning the fight elsewhere. St. John Bosco will allow Whitney High to tie them up again. This time, though, at halftime. Equaling things 6-6. Well, we switch to the opposing side where St. John Bosco can maybe use a little bit more of Kane on that attack.
Well, once again, rounds where you see just exchanges, but it's 6-6 half. after the start that we saw coming out of John Bosco and Whitney High just kind of giving themselves definitely a rally and a run for their money. We're expecting this kind of game to kind of go this distance. John Bosco, this isn't their pick. It isn't one of the newer maps and the archetypes that we've seen being presented by Riot. It's a tried and true. It's one of the OGs. I mean, you're expecting a lot more equilibrium here, and I mean, that's what's provided to us. That only kind of gives me a little bit of stress for what we could possibly see on the set if we get there. I mean, with this map not even really being equal across the board, still kind of being one-sided towards that attacker side, but it always comes down to how these teams are able to react and whether or not they're ready for it. But both these teams obviously are. With a little bit of a pistol round going away and a big push possibly coming onto the A site, slow and steady, but controlled chaos, I'd say, from John Bosco. They go uncontested and they get the spike down. It all comes down to the 5v5 retake.
VAL will finally stick down this plant, and St. John Bosco have prepped themselves up pretty nicely here, Dallas. It's pretty rare to see a first round be so quick for a plant. And Whitney High, though, they have all 5 players, something that maybe they were struggling with initially in that first half against St. John Bosco. Can at least take their chances here for a post plant. Most of the time, though, A site is retakeable because of the utility that's behind it. That's not the case for a pistol round. Kane gets a first blood, though. The Frenzy sends out a rally, but can't get much past that. The relay bolt just doesn't go far enough. St. John Bosco are pretty much primed to go for this hold. Miri, dangerous firefight at that range of the Frenzy. Thankfully, Enzo already low. And it's just, that'll be it. There's no chance now with that nano swarm nade. Dan realizing it. There was no time in the first place. Though all will fall, who cares? It's a pistol. St. John Bosco will take the first, and hoping that they don't repeat the fracture second half of letting Whitney High take a second.
I mean, it was a back and forth, and I enjoyed it. I mean, considering that, I mean, the chaos that ensues from those situations is always kind of a nice little thing to unravel. But, I mean, regardless, I mean, Bosco, this is going to be where they're starting to step up. I mentioned it earlier. They are very aggressive. It was kind of starting to bite them in the rear for a little bit for those first couple rounds on that first half. I mean, you had the element of surprise there, I mean, during those maybe first couple rounds. But past that, though, we start getting the rifles, and once you're trying to go ahead and really say, I got the better weaponry, they also have a better idea of what's going on. But that's not the problem anymore. You know the aggression's coming through. You know this team is going to be pushing something. You know they're going to be working together, and they do it as a unison to push on the A side, mow through a couple of these players. And then that, well, one more is there. So why not go ahead, get another kill to kind of top things off in a 5v2 situation. Kane, I don't blame him, just go ahead and kind of push into spawn. Not too much health to work with. Not really losing too much in the meantime. And honestly, could go ahead and get that extra tick. And that's exactly what happens. Still sitting on absolutely nothing.
Flawless round 2 for St. John Bosco. They do finally deny Whitney High from that same fracture performance, so they have that as a 1-up. Because they weren't able to get a huge lead like they had previously. It was what? 8-4 at halftime or something like that? Last time?
Yeah, it was only 4F.
They weren't able to get the same statistic. And Whitney High were able to at least go 1 for 1, which is good. But defending is such a difficult thing for a map like Haven if you can't hold long on C. Retaking the A site's fine. Some teams opt for a very active defense. Some teams opt for a more passive approach. Look at what we're seeing come out for Whitney High towards that A defense. They're playing in through short ramp and long. They wanted to aggress, but the pressure's on the C side. Kane is in. Kane is sprinting and finds 2 on site, clearing the objective by themselves. And though they do fall to Surge, the damage has been done, and now St. John Bosco in a post plant can hold tighter angles where their weapons they were bringing, those SMGs, will be much better.
Sleep, brother.
Yeah, once we get underway, Bosco with 3 players. I mean, Whitney High getting caught out with the utility. I mean, it's a very, very difficult situation. It seems like H Park really just can't get the job done, especially when you see those kills going underway. That is 3 rounds in a row on a latter half of the map pick that your opponent went for. So I'm sure Bosco is feeling outstanding right now because that aggression that comes through, that is what Neon's there for. Those eco rounds, it's not a chamber, but it's a little bit more expensive, a little bit more risky, but man, it's the payoff just come back much, much higher, much prettier there towards the end. So Bosco to come out with 3 to start off this half. That's the kind of dominance you need. That's what we saw on that first map of Fracture. And they're just repeating that success, but when it matters, a lot more than I'd say earlier on.
I'll point out that we didn't get to see the Neon very much. Oh my goodness, what a shot by Surge on map 1, because it just didn't feel like Kane was able to provide the success defensively that I was highlighting after that initial play from dropping from heaven on A. They didn't get to use the wall on the C side. They didn't get to help their team cut sightlines to engage. Kane hasn't been allowed to be Kane. Kane has been much less like sugary, as you would say, sugar cane, a little bit more bittersweet. Now you're seeing a tough pill to swallow for Whitney High. Maybe they're not a sweets folks. Maybe they don't have a sweet tooth. But St. John Bosco, they are happy with the result. Kane had already charged their ultimate by that 4th round. Believe they almost had it halfway through that 3rd on top of it. 25-11. Add 3 more in that last round, if not more. And it's already over for them. St. John Bosco reached double digits, and Whitney High, do they even have much they're bringing here in this round? It just seems St. John Bosco are just using this momentum so effectively.
Yeah. It's great standing by them. Make sure to just kind of nail this thing down, put the nail in the coffin, and really just kind of hit this one home. But I mean, still, if there's time left on the clock, you go ahead and at least win this round because there's still rounds left on the board to make sure to surmount sort of a comeback. But it doesn't really start up all that well when you lose the first blood once again. That's not a recipe for success, and even better yet when you see things doubling down. A nice, huge setup. This entire 3rd of the map being covered from angle to angle by Bosco, and the aggression of just a roaming Neon, just kind of checking and patrolling every single point of it. It doesn't really seem like he can do too much, and Whitney High is very, very aware of that, so they opt to go ahead and save these guns and hope that the next one's going to prove much better.
Gotta put St. John Bosco at 11 there. They're 2 away from just taking the victory on this map, but just taking the victory outright. It's a best of 3, and
One enemy remaining.
if you notice, I mean, they don't necessarily have that screen in the overlay for them in game, but they surely will remember it. They're the ones playing it. St. John Bosco took map 1. They took map 1 well, 13-6.
Yeah.
That could be the exact same scoreline we see come out here. I honestly think Whitney High needed to take that round of the chin, because look what's going to happen here. Because they saved 2 rifles, they're going to feel pressured to force the rest of the team to match those rifles. Instead of just saying, okay, we thrifty, we play for an OT, we're going to just have to be flawless. Instead, they're entering this round pretty much no armor, soft armor for everyone. Surge will only have a Blade Storm, no Stinger alongside it like they had done previously. And they'll have to go into that last round. If they lose it, which may look like they could here, with literally nothing in their hands, because they won't have the eco to work with.
Yeah, I mean, you put a big gamble in a round like this, and knowing that's not really working out too much for you is kind of disappointing. I mean, you got at least a little bit of hope here. You got the shutdown, you got some armor, you got a player, you have a pick in this fight, but you also got sniffed out by an owl drone, which makes things really, really rough for you because Kane's going to swing. I don't know what this COD timing is, but I mean, I guess when you're moving as fast as you get character, you got plenty of opportunities to make it feel like it.
It was a good attempt by Surge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about all you can ask for. And here's the problem that I was talking about. Surge is the only player that can really buy a full mainstream rifle and armor. H-Park maybe could go alongside that, and they will be capable of doing so. They were teasing an Odin for a moment. But everyone else, soft armor, iffy buys. Dan's got a Spectre, a Judge for Yagami, a Guardian, which we know H-Park can use well. We saw that in Fracture. But it's in the hands here of Enzo. Whitney High just... I think they need a gamble stack on C-side. I think that would have been their best chance. And unfortunately, it's too little too late to do so. St. John Bosco have already put pressure here towards C Cubby. But thankfully, they're kind of fast. They can retreat away. And Whitney High still have defenses on B and A, meaning that this rotate could still be good for them.
Yeah. They just can't really afford to be caught out here. Slow and steady wins the race, but Bosco, they haven't really lived by that rule. That hasn't been their go-to. Speed has been the name of the game here because, I mean, I guess once you get to the point, I mean, you just don't give Whitney High even a chance to recover. But now, you're kind of giving them ample time to do that. 50 seconds remaining on the clock. It's not too much of a concern for them, but knowing that Whitney High, I mean, once again, they're kind of sitting in these points where you don't have any heals. You're just taking a lot of tick damage. Your Omen is nearly dead, and the From the Shadows isn't going to do everything you need it to. You're just looking for some early aggression. That Judge isn't going to find every result in the world. It comes down to Surge!
Wow!
And that's a 3K. That means everything for the squad.
That's the perfect play. Surge may have just given a huge breath of life over to Whitney High. A much needed one as well. Yagami's got the Judge. You need this gun here, and it works.
That's it.
Perfect. Again. Whitney High will find themselves at least not having the same scoreline they had on Fracture of a 13-6. They'll find themselves at 7. And St. John Bosco, huge denial of their entry through garage by Surge. The perfect play. But now they're bringing an operator. Okay, now they're going with an operator.
Here.
This didn't work for Kane.
Here.
Yeah. But then again, they also took a completely different route. I mean, Kane was completely lapped. Was sitting in A main on Fracture. They all went through drop, and you're just kind of, I'm kind of caught out now. You're holding an angle. You were holding a lane. And there is no real flex here unless you go ahead and get ran down by about from the shadows, and that's just not an option because, well, it's not on the field. What is on the field, though, is plenty for Whitney High, but one of them's already lost. Hunter's Fury. He could have gone ahead, had some nice pressure on that, but Enzo able to go ahead and give a nice retaliation. That is Kane, the MVP for St. John Bosco so far, shut down. But one thing that isn't shut down is the rest of these players who is pushing onto this B side unbeknowingly by a lot of the squad. But, I mean, that alarm bot gives you the information. Dan is in a really bad spot, but is able to go ahead and give some breathing room for themselves in the meantime.
Yeah, and that rolling thunder to make sure Dan can not only escape outward, but once that confirmation that was the spike actually going down, it makes it so that St. John Bosco have to fall back. Miri, headshot kill. Surge, the player at the other end. Being able to cut down a man like that means huge chances for St. John Bosco. To make matters worse, looky here, lockdown in play. Will they detain anyone? Looks like a hasty retreat being made here for Whitney High. They'll give up that space, but a defender lockdown used as well. There is plenty of time to still escape from this. But notice how far out they're separated. Sky, though, gets the upper hand on Yogami, and that is a site for the taking. No rotate made available for Whitney High, and Dan with the wrong way to see. It will be St. John Bosco in a post plant.
Most definitely will be. Plenty time to go ahead and get things done there. Whitney High already invested every single ultimate they had under the sun. Not really the effect they wanted to come out of it. So now it's their turn to look at ultimates, to look at bullets, and to look at closure. Because that's what we see with John Bosco closing things out. Not 13-6. Whitney High, it was their map pick, so they found themselves one more. But they have one less game to go because, well, things are done.
Oh, what's up with Haven and being the last map to end on? Last time I was on broadcast here for the HSEL, the match before mine ended on a Haven, and it was a very close game. Came out towards the end. The match I did was on Haven and was a total lopsided affair, but it was aces and 4Ks. We saw, I think, 8 out of the 13 round wins were either a 4K clutch from a 1v4 or an ace. It was a ridiculous affair. This one, very close. Despite the scoreboard saying differently, it really did feel like any round could be turned around for Whitney High to go their way, especially when it came to that first half. There's a reason it ended 6-6. The game was close. St. John Bosco just had the leeway to control their pacing, the opportunity to determine when they were to attack and who they attacked, because once they switched to the attack, they thrived on speed. And look who was at the forefront of that one, just like that round right there, Kane, who was a monster. 30-plus kills, I believe, was the final tally. 31 and 13 for Kane on Haven. That's what, 50 kills total between the two maps? It's ridiculous what this player can do, and they are a big threat going into the finals.
And even then, I mean, it's not really all that hard to sniff out. I mean, this player just knows how to shoot. That's all it really comes down to. I mean, we're not going to go ahead and sing the praises of, the intellectual and the grit of this player. I'm not going to go ahead and feed all of that to you because I don't want to sell it and I don't want you eating it. I want you to just look at the plain facts that's here on the field. Kane can shoot, and that's all it comes down to. It's Valorant. That is the majority of the game. I'd say about 80% of an actual matchup. The utility, sure, creates opening windows and can deal damage and get kills. The only ones that are actually getting kills are like showstoppers and obviously like Tour de Force back in the day and now Blade Storms and whatnot. They still require aim, though, at the end of the day, and that's what it comes down to. You have to find a way to get these kills. Kane was just doing it early, every single time. It almost made them falter in that first half and fall behind as we saw that it didn't really work out to help them. As every single time that we saw Madison be kind of ready for it, sit and spawn, and let Kane just kind of rush in and say, hey, here's a nice little surprise party, you're dead. They just lost that whole oomph factor right off the get-go. And every time they just kind of forgot about it and said, hey, he's not going to do it. He did it. And got 2 or 3 kills off of it. You can't let that luxury go to your head. You can't let that get you behind because I guarantee you we could have seen a third map get underway if they at least just stopped that 2 more times.
The good news for Whitney High, though it may not seem like there is much considering they're out here, this is their loss here in the semis, and because of that, St. John Bosco will move on to those finals. You're not just playing for a scholarship as a prize pool, you're also playing for a scholarship because you're selling your name. You're selling yourself as a player. Dallas said, I'm not trying to sell something to you and have you eat it. The players are trying to sell something to you, and they're trying to have esport directors, colleges try and eat that. Teams, if they opt not to go to college and just try to go for a pro scene. These players, they are selling themselves as individuals. And a player like Kane, you're going to look at them first, but you got to look at the utility behind him. What's allowing Kane to do that? Is it purely Kane, or is it the team behind them? Is it purely Surge in a 3v1, or is the team letting Surge play that position to hold that angle? What is going on? And I think for both these teams, Esport Direct would be plenty happy. Me and Dallas have held plenty of conversations with Esport Directors that get giddy in excitement talking about upcoming high school players and what they're willing to give, the scholarships and everything in between. So keep your eyes out and your ears open, and make sure to keep checking your DMs and also applying, because it's a very important factor. But that'll be it for us here, me and Dallas, on this broadcast. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. St. John Bosco find themselves victorious over Whitney High School in a 2-0 fashion. We'll catch you guys for the next one, maybe even the finals to come forward.